Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another video. Today is June 5th, and I'm making this video just like really quickly. Kind of just struck me that I needed to do this for the sake of prosperity. Some of you guys who've been watching my videos, you know I've been documenting my journey as an investor. I talk a lot about different investments I've made and make and am making. Um, End of quarter two, 2019. A lot of things have gone on in both the crypto market and in the stock market here in the United States, which is what I focus on right now. The last video I made in quarter one, I talked about sort of my strategy going forward for the year. Investing to me is like playing chess. If you've heard me talk about this before, it's about reacting to the markets, and it's about being adaptive and also playing the right piece at the right time. So you might have a strategy going forward, but the market, you could also think of it like playing poker, right? Like the hands, I don't really play poker, I only play chess. But my understanding is like, you have to sort of assess risk, and you have to be able to, although you might not know what cards are going to be played, or you probably know what cards have been played, you need to be able to sort of call people on bluffs, and the market bluffs a lot. It's June 5th, so some of you guys who for 2019, the S&P 500 over the last 2 weeks it dropped pretty significantly. I don't know what it was in terms of percentages, but my portfolio was red, not in the red, but everything was red. And that was the time that I started buying more equities, right? Like I've talked about this a lot. You got to buy when there's blood in the streets. I actually decided to make an investment in an entirely new company. I'm not ready to talk about it yet because I'm still accumulating. I got in at a price that I feel very comfortable with. I'm very excited. It's in an industry that I have not yet invested in. I guess a kind of a controversial industry, but I'm very, very happy to be an investor in this company. And I look forward to sharing that with you guys in future videos. But what I want to focus on in this is sort of talking about the way I've been balancing, the way I've been putting in money to both the equity market, the crypto market, and how I've been changing the flow and the balance, right? So I'm going to sort of start by saying the last video I talked about I was going to be putting a lot of money into crypto throughout 2019 because I believed the market was going to continue. I thought things were undervalued, right? I thought the stock market was largely overvalued at the beginning of 2019. I was not expecting this sort of mid-year dip, and that sort of made me pivot. And I started putting more money into the stock market because things were really low. Started buying a couple of things that I've already been invested in at lower prices, companies that I still feel really strongly about. And then at the same time, we had this big run up in Bitcoin where I think the last time I made a video, Bitcoin was somewhere in like 3,000s, 4,000 price range, maybe even 5,000. Over the last month, Bitcoin's been trading in between $7,000 to $8,000, and that was kind of an overnight increase in price, where Bitcoin kind of went up 50, 60%. And I put the brakes on buying Bitcoin because I thought that it was relatively overvalued. Now I still dollar cost average in, but just some of the money I had set aside and was planning to put to Bitcoin, I actually used that money to buy equities and stocks because stocks were relatively underpriced in my book. And I think that was a strategic decision. Now, regards to crypto, the last video I made, I talked about I discussed that 80% of the money I was putting into crypto would go to Bitcoin, about 20% would go to Decred, and that also changed, right? For a risk reward sort of rebalancing, recalculations in my head, and I didn't even realize that this was happening. It just kind of happened organically, really. Like whenever I deploy capital, it's very instinctual, so I don't do it like I watch the markets. I'm always watching the markets. I'm always staying on top of the markets. And when I feel like now's the time, I do it. And what happened is I actually started putting 50% towards Decred and 50% towards Bitcoin. And that was largely because I thought the price of Bitcoin had appreciated a lot more than what Decred had on a relative basis and on a risk-adjusted basis. So that was just kind of what ended up happening. It wasn't like necessarily pre-planned in that way. And I'm very happy that I did that. I've, continued to increase my position in both Decred and Bitcoin and feel still super strong about those projects. What was I going to also comment on? The last thing I wanted to comment on was the ongoing trade war, right? So the company that I invested in, the stock company that I talked about earlier, I haven't mentioned it by name, is a company that I think what I'm calling, I think there's a class of companies that are impacted in the markets because of the trade war. So they kind of get beat up a little bit more for a variety of reasons. And this company in particular is one that I've been keeping my eye on. And I think that the trade war has unjustly punished it in pricing. And it's just interesting to see how this trade war continues on. And the last thing I kind of want to comment on as it relates to the U.S.-China trade war is, first of all, you guys should go watch my video that I did on Principles by Ray Dalio. I had the book right here. I just finished this book and I made a video on it talking about why I read it, and also put some interesting comments towards the end of that video on the trade war and what it means for the U.S. dollar, what it means for Bitcoin. And where was I going with that? Oh, I was going to comment on the FANG stop. So Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they kind of got this acronym called FANG, right? These are some of the biggest companies in the S&P 500. A lot of index mutual funds have these as some of the highest weighted percentage-wise companies in the index, and also some of, these are trillion-dollar companies, so some of the highest market value companies in the United States and in the world consequently. And Apple's an interesting one to comment on. If I was older investor, like in my 40s or, maybe 30s or something, I'm still young. I'm still, my mid 20s. So I'm still taking high risk plays and I feel very comfortable. But I think Apple is underpriced. And I do think that, there's a lot of interesting things going on in that company. And the only one of the, Amazon too. Amazon I really can't comment on. I don't know too much about it. But Apple, I understand that product. I understand that business model. I understand their strategic advantage as well. And I'm very excited to see them sort of pivoting to a privacy focus and a data ownership focus. And yes, I think they're uniquely positioned amongst those companies to continue to succeed. And also, in due time, I do believe, whether this is 10, 15, 20 years down the road, sort of this trade war. I think basically Apple is a company that has been also unjustly punished as a result. I mean, China has been, I can't speak too eloquently on this, but I can talk about it sort of at a high level. What I think I understand, it's not hard to understand that there are these major corporations in the United States, and China, being the dominant sphere of the East, has sort of the equivalents, right? So Alibaba, Amazon. I don't know what their equivalent is of Apple, but Huawei, something like that, Highway, something like that. They do have a kind of an equivalent, a big telecom company. China wants China to succeed, and Apple, being an American company, I think has kind of incentivized. Man, the lighting is so bad in here. Maybe I'll sit back. Has incentivized. Long story short is, when all is said and done, and all these markets start to kind of democratize, and free market competition inevitably wins out because of Bitcoin and other, basically because of Bitcoin. I think Apple is one of those companies that's going to benefit drastically from that. So I'm on a 10, 15-year play. Apple's a company that, if I was older, wanted a less risky investment. I like taking these risks right now because I'm still young. As I've said, it's so far paid off well for me. But Apple is a company that I think is undervalued amongst those companies. Other noteworthy companies, something I'm keeping my eye on, is Tesla. Tesla's been getting beat up recently, and I'm looking to scoop some Tesla under $200 if possible. I'm just keeping my eye out on that, and it just keeps getting dumped and dumped. But I think there's a long-term play there. I think that the EV stations, so the electrical vehicle charging stations, that's a huge market advantage. And yeah, enough about Tesla. There was one more thing I was going to comment. Oh, all these IPOs. Like, what is IPO within the last couple? Uber, Lyft, Zoom. Zoom is the only one of these that I actually even considered buying. But I'm not going to because I don't like doing IPOs really. You just never really know the way those things are going to go. And I don't know enough about Zoom, but I do know they're profitable. Unlike Uber, I think Lyft might be profitable. But yeah, a lot of IPOs going on. To me, that's just late stage. To me, it's actually indicative of late stage depression, right? I think it's VC investors cashing out. It's founders cashing out. It's distributing risk to the proletariat, and it's really sad actually because I do think that one of the consequences of the next recession is going to be it's going to dramatically impact an entire generation's 401ks and retirements, and that's it's very sad to think about. But I hate ending this video on such a depressing note. This background is not ideal. This is really raw. I just had to do this video. These thoughts were just flooding to me on my way back from physical therapy, and I'm all about documenting, and I just wanted to share this. So thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next investment update.